That's it. James Blunt, obviously 1973, which is, that's the year of my birth, which I don't need to get into, but it's 10 years before the year of the birth of our guest, Reggie Yates. It's a little segue there, Reggie.
That was very smooth. That was very
Thank you very much. For those who don't know, and I'm sure you do, he's a presenter, an actor, writer, director, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's CBeebies, whether it's The Voice UK with Holly Willoughby, whether it's documentaries, whether it's podcasts. I mean, I've really enjoyed the last 3 minutes chatting to you before you came in here because you've so much to say. But it's an epic career. I mean, what age were you when you kicked off?
So there's another age-related connection here.
What's happening
another
here?
Another time-related thing. I started super young. I started when I was 8 years old.
Yeah, there you go.
I was acting, and I was from the beginning surrounded by people that I admired. You know, like my second job. The first job I ever did was, I don't know if you remember the sitcom on Channel 4 called Desmond's, which was about a barbershop in Peckham. Yeah. And that was mind-blowing for me because my entire family were obsessed with that show. And then the second job I did was Fry and Laurie. Yeah. And I did a sketch with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. And it was just kind of like, these are actually normal people, not just weird faces that appear on screen.
Yes.
And it just sort of changes your relationship with not just media, but with stardom and career. And from a young age, I wanted to be like them, not because they were famous, but because they had careers.
What a great observation. You know, when people see people from the TV that they've been watching all their lives, it's like the Twilight Zone. You know, and you must get this where you get a double take on the tube or a taxi, and they don't know whether to approach you or to. It's a bit like when you're a kid and you see your teacher out of context. You know, in the shop.
Unfortunately, no one looks at me with the respect that they give teachers. That's for sure. I'll tell you what I do get, which is really lovely, and this is a bit weird saying this publicly because I really hope it doesn't change from now. But touch wood, God willing, long may it continue. People have a really nice relationship with me. Lovely. And on the street, people talk to me as though they know me. So no one goes, Reggie Yates. People go, you're right, Reggie, how you doing? And I'm the one that double takes. I'm like, wait, where do I know you from? But they are like, someone described it to me recently as, mate, you've been in my lounge while I've had cereal as a kid in my PJs watching you. And then when I was at uni and we were all sitting around in the shared uni house watching documentaries, you were there too. And then on Christmas Day, Christmas Top of the Pops, you were there with my family. It's like you've been in my house my whole life. Yeah. And for anybody who's in their mid-20s or early 30s, you know, I've been on screen for over 30 years now. So it's kind of true. It's a weird thing to feel.
It sounds that they have a familiarity with you, and you can't counter that because they're strangers. Yeah. So it's a strange relationship, and yet it's warm.
Thankfully, it's warm.
It's really nice. It's quite sweet, actually.
It's really sweet. Like people genuinely feel like they know you, and in some way they do because we've grown up together. I've grown up with my audience, which is really nice.
I loved when we were chatting a little before about you're turning 40 in your case, and what it does to you. And I was saying to him, I remember around that time, 10 years ago, it can be a freak out time, or it can be a sort of, so I've got X amount of, this is going to sound bleak and morbid, but you kind of go, well, I've been here for so long, I've got X amount left. So what's the point in giving out about, or worrying about what people think of me? What's the point about not being nice? Or what's the point of not treating myself to that pair of runners? Or, this sort of thing. What happened to you? Because you said it's been an extraordinary 2 years for you in your soul, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you stop caring about the opinions of others, and also my priority now is just being happy and being around the people that I love. Like where I was chasing the party maybe in my 30s, now I just want to be around my siblings, my nieces and nephews. I love hanging out with my mum. I love spending time with my family and my chosen family, especially now because we have such history. You know, my closest friends, they might as well be blood at this point because we know so much about each other and have experienced so much together.
So what happened? I mean, was it an overnight, or was there a development in things that made you realize your Damascus moment?
Yeah, I think 40 for a man in particular is like a real, particularly if you're like me, single and you don't have children, but you want those things, you want to be married, etc. And you hit 40 and you suddenly go, there's a lot that I could freak out about right now, but I'm also really glad that my choices have got me to this position where I still have choice, where I have the career that I've worked for, but also I'm the best version of myself, which ideally will make me a better dad or a better husband. And in this context, you know, better at my job, because thankfully everything that I do now is connected to who I am as a human being.
Yes.
And I'd like to think that who I am makes me a better writer, makes me a better director, makes me a better podcaster as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I want to talk about all those things. I'm just curious, do you find it hard to date because you're so well known?
Well, I'm hardly David Beckham. Do you know what I mean? It's not like there's people screaming, running after me down the street.
No, but if you've turned up at a date after, I mean, how does someone like you go about going on a date? Or I mean, do you go online?
It's not straightforward. Is the short answer.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. I mean, I have been known to put pictures of myself up in phone boxes in areas that I like the look of. No, I mean it's not easy. Yeah. It's not easy, and you name it, I've sort of tried, that thing of only dating people that do what you do, dating people who do the complete opposite. I mean, at this point, I'm doing what the religious people say: let go and let God. I'm letting it happen,
and then see what happens.
Yeah, I'm not trying to force it.
No, and as you say, you're being 41 as a man is a very different prospect as being 41 as a woman when it comes to, say, starting a family or what have you.
Yeah.
You've got biologically more time on your side, which is one of the great unfairnesses of inequalities really of Mother Nature. But here we are.
I'm very aware of it, and I've got a lot of female friends, and I recognise my privilege in that as being a man, not having to think about that in the same way.
Yes.
But it is something that I want, and it is something that I'm looking forward to. But the last thing I'm going to do is rush that.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we're in a really interesting stage where what it means to be a dad is different to what it's meant for every generation prior. Dads today are more different than they ever have been.
Yes.
And I can attest to that firsthand because every single one of my friends around me are dads suddenly. And particularly, if you're the child of an immigrant, the way that you're raising your kid is eternally different to the way that your parents were raised because they were literally born in another country. Yeah. So culturally, you are a different parent to your parents.
Yes.
So I'm just drinking in all the information I can because, I just don't want to get that bit wrong.
You're going to be the best research dad that ever lived. Okay. And this is the kind of thing you're talking about on your podcast. So if we could take a little bit of music, you're happy to stick around for a little while?
I just realised that I slurped my tea really loudly on mic.
It's a great sound.
It's horrible. It's horrendous.
That's a podcast sound.
It's not mate, I spent over a decade at Radio 1. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here.
Of course you are.
But doing that.
Slurping.
Yeah, you're not even allowed to drink in the studio.
So you're not allowed here either.
Oh, really?
We'll be back in a second.
Sorry.
I'm really enjoying your company today, and
thanks,
Reggie. And the Reggie Yates podcast is back. You were explaining to me a little bit before this, as we were listening to the song, that COVID, we don't need to get even the mention of it gives me the heebie-jeebies. So let's not get into that. Suffice to say, it's back, and tell people what it is. I made an observation which I'll get into in a moment, but tell people what they can expect when they tune in.
So the show started in 2018, ran for a few years, got to COVID, and sorry, we don't say that word. Got to the Panasonic, and we decided to just take a break like everyone else.
Yeah.
We didn't want to entertain while everybody else was taking a break, and that break ended up being 4 years, and now we're back, and essentially the show is the show about nothing until it isn't. It's me and 3 of my best mates, and we just hang out and talk, and somehow important stuff comes up. So we could just be sitting there for 15 minutes taking the mick out of one of our shirts, and then suddenly it becomes a conversation about mortality.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I noticed with podcasts, and this is part of the reason I'm so glad to be doing it again, is that there are lots of people that feel as though they have this weird sort of guru right to tell people how to live and how to not be a bad person.
It's very popular these days.
It really is. And that's not what we are. We're just normal guys who are trying to figure it out like everyone else.
Yeah.
And you got some geezer off the telly and 3 people you've never heard of before.
Yeah.
But because of that, I think it feels like a conversation that's accessible and that people feel part of. And that's what's been really beautiful about being back.
Precise. So what I was saying to you from listening to your podcast is that if it was in the bar, the 4 stools there, I'm on the 5th.
Brilliant.
And if it was a coffee shop and there were 4 seats around the table, I'd be pulling up the 5th.
Amazing.
So, that's a compliment to you and your friends, because that's what great podcasting should be, where you kind of want to, as I say, shout at the phone / radio and give out or join in either way. And that's what but you do talk about things. I mean, even as we were shooting the breeze on air a few minutes ago, we were tapping into the whole idea of you saying, I'd love to be a dad, I'd love to be in a relationship, what have you. And this is what you talk about. Your friends, they're all of a certain vintage, therefore they're all becoming young parents, young dads. And it's whatever toxic masculinity is, flip it, and that's what we get with you and your pals.
That's really kind. I mean, there are a lot of people that aren't that archetype of the toxic geezer man that has existed forever, and that a lot of people sort of expect all guys are. And I've got quite a few female friends, and they've said about the show, which I think is really cool, is that it feels like the conversation that their husband or their brother has when they're not in the room, and they're able to hear how men talk that aren't gross.
Because they're you're quite right. Because you're exhibiting vulnerability among each others. Yeah. It's so healthy. And dare I say it, wholesome. But and maybe women are listening in to go, oh, I thought they'd be talking about X, Y, Z. But in fact, they're talking about quite meaningful things.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. We're still guys and we take silly jokes and take the mick out of each other.
I'm sure it's heavy editing on occasion.
Oh yeah, long editing process. A lot comes out.
I can imagine.
But what is left is the stuff that we can share and the stuff that feels like who we truly are as men, but also us challenging each other with complicated conversations. Like we had a really beautiful conversation about mortality because one of the guys lost his dad and is now a father, and it just led to this really gorgeous organic conversation about being a dad while your dad isn't around.
Yes.
And a lot of people can identify with that.
You know, so I told you 10 years I knew. So when my father died, we would all sat around and had a few pints in Dublin and with my pals, and we were all saying how much we love our children and how much we want to hug them all the time. And I was saying, and our dads were okay at that. Some of them were saying, I've never got a hug from my dad. And I said, well, our dad's generation were all born in the 1930s. Can you believe that?
Wow.
And so they were really what I call the last sting of the Victorian wasp. It just wasn't done. But they weren't bad people. It's just and now and I would include myself and probably your friends who are dads in this, and maybe you're the same with nieces and nephews or whatever it might be. We love a hug. And we love it. I mean, maybe it's over, but I'm sure you've had this chat with your pals and the difference. And you mentioned something else as well about coming from different cultures. And tell me a bit, what sort of...
Well, I think the thing that's become really obvious in our conversations on the show is that we are experiencing a version of masculinity and a version of existing as husbands and as boyfriends that has never really happened before.
Yes.
Because, mental health is on the agenda in a way that it never has been before.
Thank God.
Fitness is on the agenda in a way that it never has been before, as is diet, but also equal rights, be that regarding race or sexuality. So our perspective on things is massively different. And even if you take Gen Z that are coming up behind us, they're so different.
I love Gen Z. I mean,
just
two of my kids are
race altogether.
Yeah, they are a different race. But even watching Kamala Harris,
okay,
now the presidential nominee for the Democrats essentially, and she's coming in she's being attacked for being a woman. She's being attacked for being a person of color. She's being attacked for having a weird laugh.
Yeah,
they're throwing everything at her, and Gen Z have responded by pulling the oar for her. It's intriguing.
It is fascinating. I think how America reacts to Kamala Harris is going to be fascinating.
So telling.
And this is going to be possibly the most fascinating presidential race ever now that Biden has stepped down, because I can't call it. I was convinced after the shooting that it was Trump's.
I agree with you.
But the reaction to Kamala is something I didn't see coming, particularly from a generation of first-time voters, potentially.
Yeah.
It's just America, I said it on the show a million times, the most fascinating and frustrating place in the world. And I've made documentaries there several times. And I don't understand it. And I don't think I ever will. Yeah. But I'm fascinated by it. I can't wait to watch.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay, look, come back and join us again, because we've loads more to talk about, but we'll do it another time. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank
Reggie
you.
Yates, a real pleasure to meet you today. Thank you for your time, and your podcast is just superb. It's the Reggie Yates Podcast. You'll get that wherever you get your podcasts, and you won't be disappointed. That's